Hi there, happy Craft Friday. I'm so excited that Spoonflower has asked me to be part of this fun-filled day. My name's Daisy McClellan and I'm a fiber artist based in Charleston, South Carolina. And today we will be making a reusable punch needle coffee sleeve, also known as a Zarf. Yes, there's a technical term for coffee sleeve. Today we will learn how to do punch needle and finish our mini rug with Spoonflower fabric on the opposite side. Okay, let's start with the materials needed for this tutorial. I've developed a kit you can find on my website, daisymcclellan.com, that includes everything that you need. First off, you need a punch needle. I like to use a number 10 regular needle from Amy Oxford. It's my favorite. Then you need a backing cloth. I like to use a monk's cloth that has approximately 12 holes per inch unstretched. And this is great for beginners. It's 100% cotton, really simple to use. Then you get to have fun and pick a fun fabric from Spoonflower. I picked a holiday fabric to show you, but you can use anything that you have in your stash. It's a great stash buster. If you're going to order online, all you need is a fat quarter. Then you need the yarn itself. I like to use a rug yarn. This is 100% wool, and we're going to be using one color for this tutorial, but you could use whatever you have on hand. Next, you need a frame. The one I'll be using in this tutorial is called a Morgan non-slip hoop, and this one is 12 inches. Then you need needle and thread. You can coordinate it, pick any color to sew on your button. You can also grab that from your stash. You'll need a hair elastic, water erasable pen or water-soluble pen, snips for cutting the ends off, and last but not least, it's helpful to have a coffee sleeve itself from your local coffee store to trace the actual pattern that we'll be using today. Okay, now we're going to stretch our fabric onto our frame. So the easiest way to do that is to unscrew your frame so that the outer hoop pops out. You'll take your inner hoop and leave it on the table, and then take your fabric and drape it across and center it as much as you can. You'll want a piece of cloth that's about 2 inches wider than your hoop on about each side. Then you'll take your outer hoop, place it on top, push it down, and then go ahead and tighten it a little bit so it's not super loose. And then after you tighten it a little bit, flip it over. And then you're going to take fabric from around the hoop and pull it in towards the center of the hoop and go all the way around while you do this. So I'll do that once, and then I'll go back and tighten a little bit more on the top, and then do it again. I might do this 2 or 3 times. The goal is to get your fabric super taut so that it sounds like a drum when you tap on it, or you can bounce a quarter off of it. So I still need to tighten it, so I'll go around again, pulling the fabric towards the center of the hoop best I can. Gets a little harder each time, but you do want it to be super stretched and tight in there because it makes it a much more enjoyable process when punching. So that's better. All right, so now we are going to take our Zarf, our sleeve, and use it as a template with our water erasable pen. We're going to trace the outside part of that. So go along, trace the outside. If you make a mistake, I like to use a brush with a little bit of water to erase it and then start again. There we go. Next, we need to thread our punch needle. So in order to do that, you take your yarn and you take the tip of it and push it through the eye of your needle, right there. So you want to go through the channel side, so not the rounded side, the channel side. So you can twist it, push it through, pull it through. All right, now the next step is pushing it through the channel of the needle. So you're going to lock it into that little notch, I should say. And then you want the yarn to fit into the channel. And to do that, the easiest way is pulling the end until it clicks into place and glides freely. So now you have this long tail at the tip. So you just want to pull your working end of the yarn so that you just have about an inch coming out. Okay, so let's get started punching. The first thing you want to do is start at one corner and push your punch needle all the way through your fabric until it hits the wood. Then turn it upside down and take that little piece of yarn and just let it go free, pull it through. And you might want to even pull up from the working end, so that just a tiny tip is showing so that you don't waste any yarn, because yarn can be expensive, especially wool yarn. All right, so we're going to do our first few stitches. So you always want to make sure your channel of your needle is facing the direction that you're punching. So we have our channel facing this direction, we're going forward, and we're barely pulling the needle out, just grazing over the surface of the fabric, about 3 to 4 holes or 1/4 of an inch. So it's that continuous motion, pushing all the way down till you hit the wood, and then repeating it as you lift up. All right, so we're coming to a turn here. So we're going to push down, and the easiest way I like to do a turn is to turn my frame, turn my needle to now face the direction that we're going now. So we'll continue on, going forward about 3 to 4 holes or about 1/4 of an inch. Now, some people like to count as they go, but I feel like after you start doing it for a while, you just get a sort of natural feel for how long the stitches should be, so you don't need to count. Okay, so we're going to go along, and we're essentially going to outline the outer part of our Zarf. Going along, you might need to slightly turn your frame. And I like to hold my punch needle like a pencil, just like you would a pencil. I find that the most comfortable. All right, we're coming up on another turn. So turning my frame, turning my needle. Now the channel of my needle is facing the direction I want to go. So we continue on. And then we get ready for another turn. All right. And you can do this sitting on the couch in your lap. You can lean it against a table like I am. They even make special frames or stands to hold your punch needle frames. You always want to make sure that your yarn isn't tangled, it's free, and that you're pushing all the way down with every punch so that you're loops are the same side. And we are actually working from the back side. So I'll just show you. This is going to be the side that is shown, and this is considered the loopy side. All right, so now we want to go and fill in this space. If you were going to use multiple colors, you could sketch out a design, use multiple colors. We're using just one, so we're going to continue on. So when you are putting rows next to each other, you want to stack them like bricks. So the way that I like to do that is by getting right next to the row that I had already punched and pointing the tip of my needle to the middle of that stitch right next to it. Now you don't want to be too close and you don't want to be too far. You want them just to be barely touching. So another turn. And I'll just show you. You might veer off to the side accidentally. So if you have a gap like that, you could go back later and fill that in with 3 stitches, or you can actually pull it out and redo that area by just scratching your fabric, your monk's cloth, to get it back in order and making sure that your punch needle is threaded correctly. So again, we are going next to the row that we've already punched and kind of stacking like bricks. So pushing down all the way till you hit the wooden handle and coming back up. And I'll just show you the back side again, your loops. All right, and so then we can continue on in sort of a spiral fashion all the way around till there's no more to punch. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how to finish the punch needle component of your Zarf. So we have one more row to stitch, or to punch I should say. So again, pull the yarn out. When you're starting or stopping colors, this is something you have to do over and over again, rethreading your needle and starting that first punch. And we're just gonna go ahead and finish this last row. Don't worry too much about any of the monk's cloth showing through, because this is the wrong side, so it's going to be hidden. And when you get to your last punch, you are going to flip it over, take your snips and insert them in the back of the needle, the rounded side, not the channel side, and pull it through and snip it, and then pull your punch needle out, and then you're done. But you do have a little bit of cleaning up to do. So that's when you take your snips and snip any little ends or tails that you have sticking out with your snips, so everything's nice and flat and you can't even see those ends anymore. Then you will take your punch needle piece out of your frame by unscrewing it, and then we are going to cut around our piece, leaving about 1 inch of fabric so that we can sew our Spoonflower fabric to it. Okay, now we've cut our punch needle component off, and now we need to cut our fabric. So You could trace it, but I like to just eyeball it by laying it on top of my fabric and then cutting a piece. And you can see it doesn't take much fabric, so this is really great if you have any scraps left over that you don't know what to do with. All right, so now we want to sew these two pieces together. So we're going to put right sides together. So our pattern side up and our loopy side. So those go together like a little sandwich, and we're going to pin them in place because we are going to sew around. You could hand sew it, or if you have a sewing machine, I like to use a zipper foot attachment. So if you have one of those, that's really helpful for getting around, or as close as you can, to the yarn. So we'll go around with our pins, and when you get to one of the short ends, you can insert a hair elastic inside and have about 1/2 inch poking out. So you just want to center it as much as possible. Have about 1/2 inch poking out. And pin it. And now we're ready to sew. Okay, so now we're going to sew our two pieces together now that it's pinned. And the way that I like to do it is by starting from the opposite end of where your hair elastic is. So I'm going to start on my left hand side at the top, sew all the way around the top part, come here and sew across the elastic, and then back along the bottom. And I'm going to leave this short section, the opposite side of the elastic, free so that I can turn it inside out when I'm done sewing. All right, so again, if you have a zipper foot on your sewing machine, that makes it a little bit easier because you can get closer to the yarn. You want to make sure though that you're not catching any of the yarn while you're sewing. And you could also hand sew it if you don't have a sewing machine. All right, so here we go. And when you are sewing over the elastic, just make sure right before you do it that only 1/2 inch is sticking out about and that you are catching it. Take it off of your sewing machine. Did you stop? Okay, now we're going to trim around our piece and turn it inside out. So for this, I like using these zigzag scissors and just getting as close as you can to your stitch. be sure not to, well, it doesn't matter, I guess, if you cut your elastic, but I'm going to try to avoid it. All right. And then this side. All right, and after you've cut around your piece, you still have your open side. You can take out the needle, and we're going to turn it inside out. So you're just going to guide it through, and this is to get the print side and the loopy side to the right side. Things that can help with this are chopstick if you have it, to kind of finagle it through, and it might take a while, so just be patient, but you will get it. Okay, almost there. Take your chopstick and sort of just help assist. It's a pretty long piece. Just be careful you don't punch any holes through. Alrighty, so we're turning it right side out. And the chopstick is good for pushing out the corners. You can also clip the corners when you are cutting around your piece. There we go. All right, so then it starts to look like the final product. All righty, so now we need to sew the end, and you can either top stitch it on your sewing machine or hand sew it right there just to close it up. Okay, to finish off your Zarf, you'll need to add your button. So I just picked a button from my stash and a coordinating thread that matches my fabric. You could match your yarn if you like. Sew that onto the opposite side of where your elastic is, and then you are all done. And one little last tip is if your elastic ends up being too long, you can add a little knot, but you can always move your button too so that it fits around perfectly. But you're all done and all set. One side, your punch needle side, other side, your beautiful Spoonflower fabric is showing. And yeah, this makes a really great gift for the holidays, great for the tea and coffee lovers in your life. And you can again find all the materials for this tutorial on my website, daisymcclellan.com. Thank you so much for joining me today for this tutorial, and happy Craft Friday.